Hey, everybody. Boy, do we have a treat for you. We have Major John Koren coming on, who is another one or another part of our Legends series, and fantastic. He was a combat controller enlisted and then became a combat control officer. Phenomenal talk. This is a part one. We've already agreed to get him on for part two. So make sure you tune in for that. But before that, make sure you check out attackelite.com. Use the promo code ONESREADY. They can get you everything that you need for equipment, training for the pipeline, whether it's Rangers, SEALs, MARSOC Raiders, Air Force Special Warfare, whatever you need. You know, you can piecemeal stuff off of Amazon if you want, or you can go and get the no kidding stuff that you will be using in the pipeline at attackelite.com. So check those dudes out. Great group of guys over there, and we have fostered a great relationship. So you know how we are. We want to help out our friends because they're helping us up. So in turn, they are helping you out with a One's Ready promo code for a discount. And now on to JK. Enjoy, because it's a doozy. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the One's Ready podcast. We're happy you joined us again. And we are back with part of our kind of Legends series. It's not going to end. We're just going to keep on bringing Legends because really that's what Air Force Special Warfare produces. Today, I have retired Major John Koren, go by JK. Appreciate you joining us, sir.
Sure. And thanks for having me.
Of course. So we were kind of connected through Tommy Howard. He is you know, the son or the prodigy of another legend who's no longer with us. But you know, we've had Mike Lampy on, we've had Wayne Norad on, and now we have you as part of our kind of ongoing series. So if you don't mind, will you dive into a little bit of kind of where you came from and how you started out to enter special tactics?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And excuse me, mentioning Wayne and Mike, they're good friends, and they know all my sins, so I have to be careful. And
yeah,
so we got to keep that closet closed and not let the bones fall out. Tommy is a neighbor who we reconnected, and the fact that I worked closely with Tommy's father, Clyde Howard, and in Southeast Asia and in combat, and shared with him recently in November some pictures he's never seen that I took, and talked about his father's role working with us and on the early BrandX days. So we can go into that. So yeah, it's good to see Tommy. I might see him tonight. I'm going to the Armed Forces a bowl game that Air Force and Baylor is at. We're going to freeze our butt off, but we're going to have fun.
Yeah, it's going to be a little chilly. I want to say, and please correct me if I'm wrong. It's either yesterday or today is the anniversary of Clyde's death, correct?
Yes, I think it was yesterday, and I think it was about 11 or 12 years ago, 11 years ago, and I saw Tommy post that, and yeah, it was sudden, as I understand it, and it was also our anniversary 2 days ago of our invasion of Panama as well.
Yep.
So that was another operation I was on, and was proud to be there with great people, great men.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to jump in, you know, too far ahead here, but like
Sure.
we just had Wayne Norad on for kind of round two, and he started talking about Panama and stuff like that. So that was great hearing all those kind of individual stories. So how did you find your way into special tactics, or at the time, you know, there's some name changes along the way and stuff like that, but how did you find your way in?
Well, somewhat of a military family, but I'm just talking about my brothers. My dad was a mortician. He lived till he was 101. I grew up in Pittsburgh area, on the east side of Pittsburgh. Didn't have a lot of money. So there were six of us, 5 boys, 1 girl. And my brother first went in and went into ROTC with John Koren University. And during the summers, he did go through Ranger training. And so that impressed the heck out of me. And then my eldest brother, Mike, he was a He was in the brown shoe days, if you will. He got drafted in 61 or 62, and he served his time. They got out. And then my brother ahead of me, Joe, he went in as well. I was getting drafted. So in 69, when I graduated from high school, and this reflects the great cognitive prowess of 18-year-olds, my buddy says, "Hey, John, let's go in the military." Oh, okay. He says, "F the Army, your brother's in the Army. Let's go in the Air Force." I said, "Okay, that sounds great." So I went in the Air Force, had no clue. So ended up in basic training in June of 69. And on the 10th day of basic training, here comes this guy walking in with his beret cocked mightily to the right, blue beret. It turned out to be Dave Thompson. He was a staff sergeant at the time. It turned out to be a great friend of mine. And he says, "Hey, you want to go to parachute school? Want to go to jump school? You get a free pair of jump boots." I'm going, "Wow, that's great." And I was making $75 a month. And if you jump out of airplanes, you get another 55. I said, "I'll try it." "Okay, well, we want you to do 80 deep knee bends in 2 minutes and then go run a mile and a half as fast as you can." Okay. I was young, skinny, limber. I did it. He said, "Okay, here's your orders." And I got there, got my extra jump boots, or my extra leg boots, actually. They were leg boots. So 2 weeks after graduation from Lackland basic training, I was at Fort Benning. And there was 5 of us there. I think, 5 of us, 5 Air Force. And we were a bunch of A1Cs, or airmen, actually, and one stripers. And we had a buck sergeant pushing us. And all we did was details, KP on the weekends, because the Army treated us horribly. "What the hell are you doing, Air Force, here? Why don't you brush that Air Force belt buckle?" "Oh, sir, we don't, Air Force doesn't, it's a brushed metal look." "Oh, that's BS, So, but I did survive. I got, I think it was about 500 guys in that jump school class. Got all my drops. We jumped C-119s. And then the graduation jump was a 141. We're going, "Wow, that's high," So got out of there and got orders for air traffic control school and went down to Keesler Air Force Base. Got there 3 days after Hurricane Camille hit. And for the next 3 weeks, all we did was details, cleaning up Biloxi and Keesler Air Force Base. And then hooked up with Tom Roloffs. He got out, but Charlie Rapp was there. And Chief Rapp and I, lifelong friends. And so we were 3 young, cocky airmen with these skeeter wings, thinking we were badasses at Keesler Air Force Base, and went through training. And so that's the initial part. I got my orders. I went to Lockbourne Air Force Base, Ohio, now known as Rickenbacker. It's a big base, dual runway base, south and east of Columbus. And so it's only 200 miles from Pittsburgh. Oh, wow, I can go home all the time. Well, not really. But it was really a wonderful assignment, because Mitch Bryan came in there. And we had about 5 or 6 young airmen that got there. And Chief Jim Howell came in. It was our NCOIC. And we were, of course, in the aerial port squadrons, because the organization back then were terrible. And we were buried there. But he, along with some other Vietnam vets, and we had Phil Ward there too, was quite a commando, if you will. They gave us the advantage of going to some specialized training. So I sent Mitch Bryan and I to jungle operations training course in Panama at Fort Sherman, and followed by Recondo School. And that Recondo School was run by the 8th Special Forces at the time. They decommissioned that group, but I'm told it was the same curriculum from in the training school where SOG went to Recondo School. Ron Holder was at Lockbourne as well, and Skip Nutting, and these are Vietnam vets. So we had that advantage, and we were impressed with those guys. And then we went to Camp Lejeune and spent 2.5 weeks working with force reconnaissance teams. And so Lockbourne was a good experience. We had temporary duties down in Panama. And so I got into those schools. One little vignette about JOTC and Recondo, it was all Army driven. And Mitch Bryan and I show up. We got 2 stripes on our arm, E3 in the Air Force. The Army doesn't know. They think we're E4s. And it's on our diploma. They don't know what to call us. So they call us corporal. And one of the guys smoked us out. He goes, Koren, you ain't nothing but a effing PFC. And I said, that's right. I'm an E3, because you weren't supposed to be an E3. You had to be an E4. But we were there. Mitch was actually the number 1 in the class. I think it was number 3. He was number 1 in class, but the Army wouldn't give honor grad to
an Air Force guy.
Can't do that, of course.
Nope.
But we learned a lot in those jungles in Panama. There's definitely it was good curriculum, and carried M14s, and it was all good from there. And then after that, I went. Go ahead.
Were all these schools that you were hitting? Were you already awarded your beret at that time, or were these?
I went through combat. I went through combat control school, second class after at Little Rock, as a matter of fact, and from there you came back and you got your beret in combat control school, but then you had achieve phase 3 combat ready status, which is some more training items, which we did. So I forget. I'd have to look at my diplomas on the sequencing of when we went to the Army schools and when I went to combat control school, but they were all in 70, 71.
Okay.
And so it was all good. And so Lockbourne was good, and had, impressive NCOs there, senior NCOs, and they weren't afraid to, kick you in the butt.
Well, yeah, it's so after talking to, you, Lampy, Wayne, it's amazing to me because we are so bureaucratic and process driven compared to back then, and we're not talking that long ago, we're talking about 70s, 80s, and even into the 90s and early 2000s, like just, like you said, you ran into a gentleman wearing a blue beret, because at the time we were wearing blue berets. And he's just like, hey, can you do this? Watch you do the run, watch you do the deep knee bends, and here are your orders. That would never happen now. We'd need, 120 days for the Air Force assignment system to work its process and formal training. And it's just, it seems like such a simpler time, if you will, then compared to now, just because there's so many different systems and processes and that kind of stuff. It's interesting to me because that is the one thing that I have noticed that is consistent talking to all of the kind of legend CCT, PJ, and TACP brethren,
Well, I empathize with that. I probably was part of that down the line as I, was commandant in the combat control school, and then I ended up on the SOCOM staff and going from there, because I understand how organizations evolve, and unfortunately that bureaucracy comes along with it. But it was a simpler day, but I do believe the Air Force really did not know what kind of capability combat control had. And we were buried in these god-awful air report squadrons, and we would get questioned everywhere, why do you need that watch? And why do you need this extra canteen, this type of crap. So we dealt with that. One little item here, when I went to combat control school, I didn't have a Viet Nam ruck. I had a pack board. And it was just a big board on the back with bungees, right? Bundle all your stuff in a poncho, and that's what you got, young man. Don't complain. Suck it up. Okay.
No frame or anything, huh?
Well, no, it's somewhat of a frame, a pack board, but it wasn't, I was hoping for an old Vietnam ruck, which we eventually carried as well. But, some old LCE equipment and a pack board. Okay, well, we'll just have to rope the stuff down and hope it doesn't, fall out.
So I don't know how this is going to come out on camera, but like I remember showing up to NDOC, and I was given just a bag with some straps, nothing crazy, no frame, no nothing. That's what we were given when we showed up to Indoc to carry all of our equipment in.
A Cordura.
I keep it right there.
Though, right? It was Cordura, a nice bag.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, but it's just it's funny the evolution, because now they're still rocking Alice rucks, at SWIC and assessment and selection and stuff like that. But it's one of those things. The Alice ruck is a proven commodity that has lasted. I mean, I don't even know when it first came out, but it's just a phenomenal bag. And it's one of those things that if it's not broken, maybe don't fix it, Okay. So, you finish all those schools, and then kind of what? So you're at the aerial port squadron, you're getting all the extra training, you're getting all the watches and the extra stuff from supply.
All the watches.
And, yeah. And then what's next for you?
Well, then I put my volunteer statement in because I want to, get into the action. And I got an opportunity to go to Pope and on temporary duty and make that first CCT mass tactical jump. And I saw officers for the first time, kind of, sort of, and go, wow, I didn't know they had officers and this many in combat control. And a couple guys stand out that I knew not well, but like David Hughes, he was a legend himself. He did very well. And then I'm standing right next to Algernon Corbett, who's one of my heroes of combat control. And we're lifelong friends. And then after that, I got orders to go to Detachment 156 Special Operations Wing at Udorn. And I left in March of 72. And I went from Lockbourne to Pope, then Pope I spent 7 months at Pope, and then I went to Udorn, and I went through jungle survival on the way over in the PI. And that was a nice experience. I enjoyed that. And so I show up at Udorn, and it's a whole new ballgame. Wow. And they're teaching close air support and forward air guides and indigenous people. And I was okay. I mean, that was what I wanted to do. And I did go and learn about the conflict in Laos and who's kind of running things. So I went on my own and picked up some of the books there, and I realized how politically it was messed up. And the fact that I realized at an early age, and I was over there when I was 20. I turned 21 on an AC-119K combat mission over northern Laos. And
oh my God.
Oh, I know. And because we trained the forward air guides on the ground, they said, well, we need more productivity out of that. Maybe you can help out. And we were, so I ended up with about 344 combat hours, flying AC-119. They were the K models out of Nakhon Phanom, NKP. And actually that night I turned 21. One of our NCOs, Tech Sergeant Frank Palmer, got shot up, and they had to return to Udorn, and he ended up with a big man, survived, but the head of a 37 millimeter AAA round was lodged in his chest, and they pulled it out. He did not die. It was incredible. It came right through the wheel well of the AC-119. And this is a little thing, Frank, how you doing? Oh, I'm fine. Down for maintenance a little bit. And I was going, wow. And but he was hurt bad, and he returned to the States. So when I got over there in March of 72, I turned 21 in May of 72, and ended up going up and back up into northern Laos. And Mike Lampy at the time was on 404 out of Longchen. We'd go up to Longchen and trade our forward air guides. And then we were then further expanded into the F-111 Beacon program later on in late September of 1972. And we actually taught the Hmong at Longchen. We established an air ops center called Red Dog Control. It's in Gene Adcock's book. Kath Seymour contributed to that. And we we used Weems plotters, just no computers, no GPS, and we put out PPN 18s at the time, and we would encircle the plain of jars in northern Laos, and we'd have offset beacon bombing accuracy with F-111s. And they reintroduced the F-111s in 72. And they would just talk to us. They'd come in straight level, 10,000 foot. We'd give them distance, direction, bearing, and they'd go into offset, and they'd bomb. And they could only release, a string of 12 Mark 82s at one time. They carried 24, and then they had 4 2,000 pounders, 4 Mark 84s. So I got to meet General Vang Pao. I got to meet the CIA, who was running Operation Momentum and the whole operation in northern Laos. And we moved around northern Laos primarily on Air America helicopters, and it was exciting. And we were in kind of half-assed looking. We had jeans, jungle boots, and a camouflage shirt with a wild volunteer patch on. Carrying a 38, and at the time was called a Car 15.
That's that's nuts. Okay, but these are all the and this is going to sound really, really fanboy, but these are the types of stories that make people want to join. And made me want to go, I want to be out there doing that kind of thing, whether it's the kind of clandestine operations or whether it's full on military operations, but being able to just kind of, because you guys have epitomized thinking outside the box, if you will, problem solving, right? Which is what we preach and we recruit to. But I mean, you guys didn't have the technology that we do now. And you guys, and I didn't realize that you guys were doing beacon bombing at that point, at least ground based.
Yeah, we were, and we also supported the B-52 ops on Iraq-like missions in Laos. We put out SST-181 X-band beacons. Mm-hmm. But interesting about that is that we were tasked to do that by 713th Air Force, which was a command entity at Udorn. But the Buffs would not talk to us. SAC would not allow that. SAC talked to their SAC operations center. We can't talk to those guys on the ground putting the beacons out. But we put those out as well. And at times we'd have to secure the sites and move the beacons around. And we're talking old BB-451 wet cell batteries, 16-pound wet cells that powered these things. We
15
had
pounds
16
for a battery?
pounds. 16 pounds.
16 pounds for a battery.
Yeah, a UHF PRC-41 on top of a BB-451 probably weighed about 30 pounds, maybe 35. It was heavy.
Yeah. Yeah, and ounces make pounds.
Yes. And so we put those out and we moved them around. And we did some operations in Cambodia in 73. We'll go over that in a little bit. But then when we came back, and Mike was able to elaborate further, we had a forward air guide program at Udorn, and we trained southwest of Udorn at the Nambu Lampul Range, which is a large valley. We were on top of a cliff. I sent you a picture of that. And Clyde Howard then came over on the team. And one other aspect of the team, little known aspect, is that we were 6 to 11 enlisted. We had no combat control officer. And I say that with a smile because, we didn't need one. Of course, I became an officer later. And who did they appoint as the OIC of this renegade band of combat controllers living in the alert area at Udorn because it was air conditioned, you see? All the other guys in Det 156 Sal, the maintenance guys, they were in the hooches on the other side of the base, and they were not air conditioned. So we ate a little
warm.
It was. So we ate in the alert area chow hall. We got to know a lot of F4 pilots, and Hugh Smith, flight surgeon of the year back in 72 or 73, and he was a great guy. And his boss was Doc Lockridge, who wore a PJ beret. And so he was one of the first PJ officers I met at the time. And Doc Lockridge was very cool, tough guy, came over, did some jumps with us. And because the 56 wing was actually at NKP, we were Det 1 at Udorn. But the large detachment, 450 people. So we did support, like Mike said, we had forward student pilot training at Nam Phuong. So we got a lot of good air traffic control. I had a lot of interesting episodes there. We evac'd Van Pyle out of Laos back in 74. We brought the Marines in from Da Nang, and then the Marines had the base, and then we left. We evac'd the Marines out. We went back to Nam Phuong. When the Marines were there, we moved our T-28 training to Con Ken, and which is south and west of Nam Phuong. So that and our survival training for our Laotian aviators, and then our training at the Thai Border Police Camp, all of that contributed to quite a special ops mix, if you will. And we didn't have much charter. You know, we had some of the old Air Force Reg 3-5 forward air guide stuff. In Jan Churchill's book on Cleared Hot, there's an example of it in the back, and that's from the old butterfly fact days in mid to late 60s in Laos. So we picked that up, and this was what we inherited from Rick Crutchfield, who left in 71, and then Mike Lampy and I ended up rewriting that whole forward air guide curriculum. As Det 1 then became NACTI TLD, Training Logistics Detachment, but it's just a name change. We were actually in the 1131st Special Activities Squadron, which is, you know, these are all cover names for this, but, you know, we didn't care anything about that. We didn't. They were just names on a paper, you know.
Yeah. Just words.
We had a commander of the detachment, and the T-28 commanders were Air Force Special Air Warfare guys. They were cool, and they allowed us to do our job, and they supported us too. They had guts. Okay, and we put them in the trick every once in a while, and and they supported us. So it was that experience and I was there straight from March of 72 to end of May 1975, 39 months straight. And it was an incredible, impressionable experience for me. And even though we lost the war, but, you know.
Yeah, I'd say you did a lot of growing and a lot of growing there. Jeez.
We did. And we realized, and Mike and I would talk in the latter days when we had other people come in, and we talk about the capability of combat control. We knew it could be more than what it is. We knew that the Air Force organization for us was not good. And there's a lot of people that felt that way. And we felt that way.
Then I'm gonna ask you, because I'm tying where kind of we're at now to where you are then. What was it that helped you kind of recognize that hey, CCT and the bigger picture now, you know, special tactics? What helped you recognize, like, hey, we can be so much more, and maybe the Air Force at that time isn't the right parent to have?
Well, I admired actually the pararescue organization, even though they were tied to an airframe. We got to know a lot of PJs at NKP that were actually doing a lot of combat rescues, because when we fly AC-119s at NKP, we'd sometimes stay in the PJ hooches and play cards with those guys. That was a hoot, amongst other activities, compartment activities.
And things that we can't talk about now.
Yes. And that was a great experience, because we heard their stories, and and these guys had a chest of medals, you know, because they did some hard stuff. They did wonderful stuff. And we, in fact, this evening, the Combat Control Foundation is going to recognize Brigadier General Stovall, who picked up an F-4 backseater named Roger Locker. And when they brought him back to Udorn, we were there. We were in that celebration, and we were going, wow, this is impressive. So we knew, all of us there on the team, and we're talking John Wood, Clyde Howard, Pepper Adams, Rex Wallman, or Rex Corbin, not Rex Wallman, Mike Lampy, Mike Brown, Dick Brawley came over, Granny Taylor came over. We knew we could do a lot more organizationally. We were hoping for that. So, but everything closed down in May of 75 because our Laotian emphasis ended in March of 73. In fact, I put the beacons out with one other. I think Stu Pressey was with me on the last arc lights in Laos in March of 73. We were up there putting the beacons out on the mountains. And that's when President Nixon was turning on and off the bombing because they may have, and it was right before the POWs got released. And so we went up there one more time, got to put it back out, put them out, go back to Longchen, run the strike, get back in the Air America helicopter, pick the beacons up, come back to Udoran. So that was the last bombing raids in Laos. And then we turned to a Cambodian emphasis. With at the time, Khmers, they were Cambodians, and they were fighting the bad guys, the Khmer Rouge, who were ruthless communists. And so we were supporting the C-123 airdrop program. And so when Mike mentioned about that we were trained, I went down to Sadahip and got trained by the Army riggers on how to rig CDS bundles and heavy equipment bundles. That was a hoot.
Yeah, it's a learning experience for sure.
It was. And then we'd airdrop them. Yeah, we'd airdrop them. We do high velocity CDS at Nafong. I almost had to fight the locals from. They would come in and try to steal every parts of the dunnage, the 55-gallon drums. We'd have ring slot parachutes. Every once in a while, we'd say, I wonder if this ring slot will, how many lines can we cut before it'll actually fail? So we'd cut a couple lines, and we get a little directional capability of a ring slot, high velocity CDS. It was, we did stuff like that. And
just to try and guide it to where you need it to go, huh?
Not really. We were just messing around.
Sorry, I didn't mean to give you too much credit there.
No, we did not have that cognitive ability at that time, but we did recover what we could, and so the accuracy was on a C-123 with Khmers flying it, and if you're on a C-123, you only got pilot, co-pilot, and the FE has to stand up from the floor and look into the cockpit, and that's where the instructor pilot would be, and to his right on the floor was an opening. And there's two wires looking straight down. That's all it is. A manual crosshair. And that's how they would airdrop on the exit point with these things. And then at times after the airdrop, we jump the 123s. So we take advantage. We bring our rigs. We do the airdrop. We come back around. We hop out. Get a free fall in.
Was he okay? I was going to say it must be free fall because I don't know that I want a static line out of that kind of platform, and at the same time off of somebody who's eyeing it off of a wire crosshair.
Yeah, no, it was free fall. But that's the other thing. We got the ability to we jumped C-47s. Couple friends came over on a MTT military mobile training team, training Khmers and Laotians on flying Goonie birds. Friend of mine, Will Elledge, did that. Major Gosnell ran that program, and he was great to us. So, and then we got the flew back seat with the Raven Fax in 01s, and because they were training the 01, they call them Chapacow. And that was their call sign of the 01 spotters for the Laotian Air Force. So we got to fly in the back seats of 01s as they were doing vectoring, as they were doing some of the dry forward air guide runs, and both from the ground and from the air. So we'd fly 2-ship 01s at times. So then we accumulated more hours flying that way too. So it was pretty intense. And it was a good team.
So you guys were essentially airborne forward air controllers, or what would be JTACs now?
Well, I wouldn't call it, because we weren't fully qualified on that. We were there with the Raven Facts, who were the absolute pros, from the Steep Canyon program. But we were doing ground-based forward air guide training, close air sport training. It was known as FAG training, close forward air guide training. It was all close air sport, so we knew it good. We knew all the air aspects, and we were very air traffic control proficient at Konkan and Namphong. And we had a couple times where we had a T-28 go in. One high-profile one was when Brian Schul, he ended up telling his story because he went in a Cambodian trained bird with a Cambodian in the back seat, and that was sensitive at the time, a third-party national, and he crashed 1,100 meters off the southern runway of Namphong, and so we recovered him. I stayed in the tower and coordinated that. We had H-43 come out of Udord, and then we had our fire department and two combat controllers. It was Stu Pressey, and I forget who else it was, might have been Mike Brown, went down and actually got him and his student, who they did not die. They were banged up. And we got them over to the parking ramp and got them out. And then there's some stories about that end up in Airman magazine talking about a special forces team just happened to be walking through the jungle and saw the wreck. Well, that's bogus. I mean, I don't know who writes that crap, but it wasn't. The guy was in a pattern. His engine seized, lost his oil, and he froze and he dead sticked it because the Cambodian T-28s did not have Yankee seats. They had no ejection seat capability, whereas the Laotian T-28s did have Yankee seats with basically 0-0 capability. So, and then Brian Schul went on to a year of recovery, got back into aviation, got back into safety, and then ended up flying SR-71s. And, a good story.
Jeez.
And so, we were part of that. And they had an accident investigation, and we, testified what happened, and everything was fine. we had some great experiences there.
No kidding. Okay, so moving on past Vietnam, right? So we're closing it down, and again, I'm bringing up Wayne just because, I talked to him 2 days ago about this. We were kind of joking. I was like, because I was like, hey, we're having legends on, and everybody knows all of your names. All the young guys, because we believe in heritage. We believe in knowing your past. One, you learn from your past, but at the same time, we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? So everybody knows your names. But he finds it funny. He's like, okay, yeah, we get all these accolades. He goes, but you realize that, there were 15 years between missions, at least that he was on. He was kind of being hyperbolic in terms of 15 years, but there was a period of time. So you leave Vietnam. When was your next kind of operational set? Was it Eagle Claw or?
No, actually, if you remember, we were in northern Thailand and we operated in Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. I was in Vietnam a year after GIs left. That's another story. But we did a continuous overseas assignment to the Philippines.
That's
and
right.
So we were there when the evacuation of Saigon occurred. When Phnom Penh, Cambodia fell, some members of our team went down to southern Thailand, Mike and Mitch Bryan, and recovered refugees there. And then we recovered some in Namphong. But when we went to the Philippines, then that was the team that did the Vietnam evacuation. And we got there after that. And then our emphasis when we were on the Philippines team and all Vietnam experienced guys was Korea. So I got to go and do a 3-week TDY surveying a whole with Dave Thompson, I might add, my initial recruiter, all these LZs in Korea, to include that island off it was southwest of the DMZ called Pyeongdo, where we landed a C-123 on the beach at low tide, surveyed it. That place got shelled every once in a while, and then we went to other places.
Just got shelled occasionally.
That's what they told us. And so we went in with 2 combat controllers and a lieutenant colonel. I call him a minder. He was a Korean Air Force guy, and then we had a American airlifter with us. Sometimes a captain, most of the time a lieutenant colonel, because the Koreans were rank conscious. And so we went to many places in Korea, and so we were off the beaten track too. We were not just at Osan or elsewhere. We went to all these other places, and of course, the Korean legacy I read up on was, back in the Korean War, was incredible, and it still was. And we were part of that. We'd exercise up there. We did the highest altitude at that time, freefall jump, 4-man team, myself, Jim Donaldson, Mitch Bryan, and Dick West. And we missed the drop zone, but they thought we went down and launched a SAR for us. It was in a river south in the middle of Korea, near the DMZ. And so Jim spoke Japanese, and the Japanese occupied Korea back in the late 30s. So we were able to flag down a bus, haul all our stuff, get on the bus, and we drive with the Koreans north about 30 clicks until we get to the correct place where we got to bring in this massive airdrop. And we got there in the nick of time and ran the airdrop.
And let me ask you, when you say it was the highest free fall jump at the time, what do you remember what you jumped out at?
We jumped the C-130 from 23,500.
Yeah, and that's high.
And we had old 4-pin Halo rigs with sleeved round chutes.
Oh, no wonder you missed the drop zone.
Well, Jim was he was most experienced. He was a master sergeant at the time, and he was jump master. And when the shepherd goes out, the sheep have to follow.
Yeah, I agree.
And we went out, and there was 2 islands in that river. They looked very similar. And and I thought it was a navigator release. I think Jim aided it visually, but we landed on the wrong island in the middle of the river. And so we had to maneuver up to the correct island to bring, these are large sandbars in the middle of those rivers. And, but we got there in time, and we brought in this airdrop of probably a battalion minus of Army troops, and everybody was happy.
JK, I don't even know what to say to that, because that's just wild to me to even think about and hear. Continue, please.
Well, it was wild. There's no question. And we had to bring all the gear back. So we had to hump our kit bags with our rigs. You couldn't bury them in the ground. We had to bring them along with all of our other equipment. So, but that was a highlight, working TDY from the Philippines into Korea. And Wayne was on those, Wayne Orred and Mitch Bryan and Mike Lampy. And so we had a good team at Clark when we got there, and they were all Clark combat experienced vets. And I knew some of them. And Jim Howell was, again, our NCOIC there. And we did have some OICs there. Robbie Robbins, he was a former tech sergeant, but he was a captain. Good guy. And we had one other major there. I don't recall his name. And I thought that, and Wayne was our training NCO, and he did some innovative training for us. We did some scenarios. We actually did some horseback training on ORIs. And, we had the old naysayers say, "You're never going to go anywhere on a horseback."
Yeah. A little bit of foreshadowing there.
It was. And we did that on Clark near the Mabalakot Gate, and got around northern Luzon. And the Clark team was a good team. And so I stayed there until September of 76. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, we had some internet lag there. Was it common then for enlisted to then go officer? Because I mean, you did it. You just mentioned 2 other folks did it. I mean, because you said it earlier, like we didn't really need at the time. We didn't really need officers other than working with other countries that are rank oriented. You know, and there's still a lot of them are still that way. To include some U.S. organizations are just, hey, listen, if you're not enlisted to a certain rank or you're not an officer at a certain rank, like I don't want to talk to you, even if you're not the tactical expert. I want nothing to do with you. So we have to have some of that kind of top coverage. But was that common for enlisted to go officers back then?
Actually, it didn't dawn on me until about 78 when I got into an educational program with Southern Illinois University that I realized there could be a pathway for me to get my 4-year degree and to apply for OTS. I did not know. I think inherently that when we saw in the mid 70s, when we saw non-combat control officers trying to explain the combat control role, they could never do that. So I believed that we should have officers to be able to do that. And if they're going to be able to do that, they got to be just like us in some respects. So we had 2 officers on the team at the time, and they took advice, you know. And actually, Roger Wildermuth was one of our young officers in the Philippines as well, and he was a stud out of the Air Force Academy, and he was very athletic, and he was a skydiver, so we skydived on the side at Clark as well, and so it was a good experience. So I did not wake up to realize that I need to get an education and pursue things until I was back in the States and ended up getting married in 77, I think, in California. And I realized, you know, I got some mouths to feed and I'm going to look around and try something else. And my brother was an officer of the Army at the time, the one who went through ROTC. And so I never thought there was a chance for me, a dumb kid out of Pittsburgh, that could do it. But we did pursue. The education office gave us some ideas, taking college level entrance exams, you know, the CLEP tests. And then we put together degrees. And this is all correspondence, no internet, right?
Right. Yeah.
Mailing it to the institution saying, here it is. Will you accept these credentials? And as facilitated by the base education office. So that helped. And then I did get into a every other weekend format at Charleston. And I was able to get a degree. And 4 to 6 months prior to getting your degree, if you had a high GPA, you could apply for OTS. So that's how I did it at Charleston.
Okay.
And that was tough because Charleston, Norton and Charleston. Norton was the beginning of BrandX, actually in 77. And then we went all to Charleston in 78, and that was intensive. So we'd go on missions, TDY, support Blue Light and Delta, which were vying for the National Counterterrorism Force. And we would do all those missions because we had the Special Tactics Team prototype, BrandX, at Charleston. And so we were on the road all the time. Then I come back, I go to 2 straight days, Saturday and Sunday, sitting in a class at the base education office.
All while trying to stand up BrandX.
But made it happen. And and I had a great leader at that time. His name was John Koren, the father of special tactics. Because John had guts, and we would go to hell and back for him. That's all there's to it.
I love hearing that. I love hearing that.
I saw that this officer not only had panache and professionalism, he was able to communicate with us and lead by example. And he did. Floored us. He was incredible. And that's why we gravitated to him. And that's why we were so effective in a cohesive BrandX team, because of our leader. There's absolutely no question. You know, we had great influencers. You know, Jim Howell was involved in the early days. Clyde Howard was there helping out in the early BrandX days. And early BrandX had a lot of people on it. You know, we had 26 to 30. I got a picture on the wall with, Mike Steinbeck's in it. Jim Keen
Yep.
was one of our officers. Jim was former Special Forces. But we whittled it down to where we had this entity get together at Charleston. And then we had to work with the Charleston team because there was a little friction at times. And we needed augmentation at times. But Carney was just an incredible leader during the heyday of BrandX. And that's what made it so successful.
It's amazing to me how one person can kind of be a center of gravity for folks and just pull people in and go in the right direction. And it's a level of inherent leadership, because I promise you it wasn't taught. Like, he didn't learn that in whatever college he went to. He learned it through either being a natural leader, through experiences, and through, trial and error, and surrounding himself with other people and gleaning the good from people, and then also observing the bad from his own leaders and seeing what not to do,
Well, your term center of gravity is spot on. And we apply that to, examining the enemy structure. But he was a leader. And all leaders have warts. He had warts. We all had warts. There's no question.
Yeah.
But he had guts. And I saw that firsthand, because when we did go out and support Blue Light and Delta, we ended up with the JTF that would come out. And this basically with the JC, the Joint Communication Support Element, and basically all REDCOM, Readiness Command guys that actually had the plan. I won't tell you the number of it because I don't know, it may still be classified, but it was a 4-digit plan for counterterrorism, because when I think it was General Rogers back in '76 said, well, the Israelis did this at Entebbe. Do we have that capability? And nobody, spoke up. And that's when Military Airlift Command put together what we called Project Recognition, brought us up there and said, we want you to volunteer for a special secret mission, but can't tell you what it is. Everybody want to be there and do it? Everybody, yes, I want to be there. That speaks well for everybody there. And that's how that started. They brought us all up to Scott Air Force Base. And it was exciting. And I got John Carney, Jim Howell, Jim Keen, some older NCOs from Hurlburt. Clyde was there, Clyde Howard. I was impressed. And we were MAC guys, Military Airlift Command guys, and we were running into the old TAC guys at Hurlburt, Buddy Bowden and company. And were they part of that whole MAC initiative? No, but they were getting involved in it too. So every time we had these exercises go off, they'd show, we'd have to work it out. And I can tell you, there was some hard times, but we all worked it out. But there were some hard times, and there's probably some fists that would fly in. I was
going to say, I got a feeling that the hard times involve some scuffles, because that's who we are. Like we fight, like literally fight, and then we're fine afterwards. It's a weird thing.
It is. Coach has a lot of it, and there's no room for error book. And through Coach, I got to meet Ben Schemmer, who is co-author, who was very influential on the establishment of U.S. SOCOM. Great guy, old Ranger, guy with guts. And so I was part of an emerging situation. I realized that, and we relished it. And we had quite a team. Pete Holt, Ron Holder, Mitch Bryan.
Yeah, all the names that you mentioned, JK, are
Mike Knappy.
All people that are like, holy shit.
Yes. But we busted our butt. There's no question. We sucked it up and busted our family suffered, prolonged TDY.
Yeah.
And, but we were there for the mission. And so I'll just continue to segue into now the Iranian thing.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Because we were on the validation of Delta down at Fort Stewart. We were on that mission. And all of a sudden, they completed, they were certified, and then the embassy went down on the 4th of November, 1979. Wow. We busted butt back to Charleston. And we knew that this was probably the first mission. And so we went through those 5 months of preparation that culminated in the failed Desert One mission. Should not have failed, in my view. And we can go into particulars on that. But as Colonel Guidry, who is the 8th SOS Director of Operations, the Combat Talent Director of Operations, who I got to know Colonel Guidry well, we had 1 month to do the mission 5 times rather than having 5 months to do the mission once. We had to be ready because we didn't know if it was going to go down. Had no idea. And then as it started to prolong itself and we got into Christmas and the Christmas break, this is never going to happen. It is going to happen. And there's some good books on it. I just recently finished Colonel Keith Nightingale's book called Phoenix Rising, probably one of the best recollections on it. In fact, I have it right here because it's
Phoenix Rising.
Yeah, right there. Phoenix Rising by Colonel Keith Nightingale. And
I just saw that on Amazon being advertised.
It is. It's been out a little over a year and a half. I had as a technical sergeant at the time, Mitch and Mike were master sergeants. I was a technical sergeant. I had the opportunity to go up with Colonel Carney, Major Carney at the time, and plan at a tactical level in the Special Operations Division. They call it the SOD. And we were all in civilian clothes, cheap Kmart suits, and I had access to everything. I had temporary TS SCIs, access to everything. And of course, I gravitated to the NCOs that were running the show, the admin NCOs, hey, tell me what's going on here. And I saw the plan. We contributed to the plan. And not only our plan, but the air plan. And I knew some aspects of the Delta plan and the initial entry plan. And I was enthralled with that because it was such a responsibility. And it was enriching for me personally. But I realized that it was the big leagues and we cannot fail. We must do our piece. And we did.
Yeah.
And we did.
It's wild to think about how much that operation and there were some successes and failures, obviously. I don't think that can be argued, but how that then shaped where we are today, just with the creation of SOCOM and the Goldwater-Nichols Act and man, so much of the operations that we've done in the last, and this is public math, I get it, but in the last 40 years, how much we have done and been able to accomplish and organize, train, and equip because of that operation.
There's no question. We broke new ground. It failed because it didn't have enough RH-53s, and it should not have failed because one of the RH-53s turned back and made the poor decision to turn back to the Nimitz. And the Marines owned that all the way. There's no question. That was a poor decision. They claim they went back to refuel and rearm and come back. That's bogus. They got disoriented. They didn't follow their instructions to press on, even though we had the haboob and the suspended dust. If they would have followed their instructions and gone to where they're supposed to go, we would have had 6 functioning helicopters, because the one that came in with the backup flight control system would have been the 7th one. So that's Wade Ishimoto from Delta will tell you that. And we've reviewed that mission a couple of times. I went back this past year with the Delta commemoration of that at the Airborne and Special Ops Museum, held 2 days late because of COVID. But that's all there's to it. But we broke new ground there. And then immediately when we came back, and we failed, we went immediately into Honey Badger, which was the second attempt. And we did a full dress rehearsal at Reese Air Force Base, dual runway. And it was a substantial operation with substantial air cover. And we were part of that. And at that time, I was a master sergeant. And then once they put that on the shelf, then I went to officers training school in September of 1980.
So real quick, JK, before and this is going to be weird because I'm breaking the third wall or whatever. Are you willing to come back on and have a whole nother conversation, because we have covered so much and we're already at an hour. But I don't want to just stop and just lose everything else that you've done. But I want to make sure you're willing to come back on.
I am, and I see where that.
Okay.
And this was a good example, and I probably talked too much, and I apologize.
No, you didn't.
Okay.
Which is why we've had Mike Lampe on twice now. I'm waiting on a third. We've had Wayne Noretta. Like, I fully anticipate 2 hours, but again, it takes a while to get people to like warm up to coming on. But I mean, what we've covered already is incredible, and we're just just cresting into the 80s. Like, so I want to have another conversation with you because it's been fantastic.
Okay.
I just want to make sure you're willing to come back on.
I am. One clarification here. This is a college up in Crescent, Pennsylvania that myself and Mike Lampe, Al Corbett, and Charlie McCarthy presented a forum about 4 years ago. Aloysius is my middle name, by the way. And my niece was the regional director at that college. So and she knew I played baseball in high school. So that's why I got that on. So, well,
I did wonder what MAC was, because I was sitting here like, okay, well, that can't be Mobility Air Command.
No, that's the conference they're in. They're the Mounties because it's a mountainous area.
Okay.
It's a mountain something conference up there in the middle of Pennsylvania with very small Division II and Division III schools. But I just wanted to show that. No, I'll be happy to do that. This was good, and you're right. We go along and we dive into a specific vignette in detail, and that's good. But I do want to say, first of all thank you for preserving the legacy. We are not legends. We're just guys trying to move the baton forward, just like you guys are, and just like this incredible force that, after I retired in 96, just evolved into the premier special operations force in the United States military, with a magnificent record, with better training, better funding, better abilities. And this speaks to the individuals in that. Yeah. With a good representation. So I make no mistake, you guys are the premier force in the world, and I applaud you for that. There's bureaucracy there, but the record in Afghanistan and Iraq is incredible.
Well, I definitely appreciate it, and I know Aaron and Trent and all the other folks within Special Tactics definitely appreciate it. I get it, because I would not want to be called a legend either. So, but for all the viewers out there or listeners, just, if you guys are noticed, JK, you're essentially the third or fourth legend we've had on now. If you're not seeing a trend of the same exact names going through and being mentioned, I'm just pointing that out. The same names are mentioned over and over again. So we definitely appreciate it. So yeah, we'll get you scheduled to come back on, because you've got a lot more to tell, and we haven't even really gone into detail. So for everybody out there, appreciate you joining us. Please like and subscribe, and stand by for the next iteration. We appreciate it. We are out here.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Jake.